10th, 1964. When I was 12 years old, I was an inmate at the Kamloops School, and we were visited by the Queen of England and Prince Philip. I was part of a group of kids that went on a picnic with her and her husband and some of the priests down to a meadow near Deadman's Creek. I saw the Queen leave the picnic with 10 children from school. The group that disappeared was 7 boys and 3 girls in age from 6 to 14 years old. They took away those 10 kids and nobody ever saw them again, described William. What actually happens to the witnesses? Another eyewitness to these events, Johnny Bingo Dawson, who planned to testify before the court, led occupations of Vancouver Anglican and United Churches. He was beaten by police. He died the next day. The official cause of death is alcohol poisoning, although an attached toxicology report said no alcohol was in his system. In 2013, British citizen David Compman was another victim of whistleblowing against Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. He was arrested and incarcerated in the London Park Royal Mental Health Centre. Drugs were planted on him. The exact same scenario was repeated with the British soldier Vivian Cunningham, who dared to ask superiors about Queen Elizabeth's outstanding arrest warrant based on court documentation. A document from the Vatican archives submitted to the tribunal shows that in January 2012, the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, by order of Queen Elizabeth, destructed evidence of the murdered children who were victims of the Ninth Circle cult. 2 eyewitnesses testified that being children, they were present during the murder of a girl in a basement under the western wing of a Mohawk residential school in Brampton, Ontario, Canada. They saw how a 6-year-old girl with a gag in her mouth, being tied on the altar, was repeatedly raped, then killed, gutted and dismembered. Her blood was drunk by 9 members of the ritual dressed in red robes. Among them was a member of the British royal family. From Anne-Marie von Bleinberg's testimony. By order of Queen Beatrix, they have organized the murder, torture, rape, and killing of children in public settings. They organized that through youth detention centers in the Netherlands. After receiving files of approximately 3 children every time, the criminals selected a child that had no relative or family. The child was put on the train to Zwolle. In Zwolle, a child was brought to a building that was equipped like a hotel. The child was put on a table and was given something to drink, and with that drink the child was drugged. In that building, people were sitting down, and at a certain moment, the child was brought into that building by the criminals, was tortured, raped, and brutally murdered before those people. The audience was around Prince Johann Friso, the second son of Queen Beatrix. There were his relatives and friends with him, so the whole building was filled with very important people from the Netherlands, ministers, high-ranking officers. From Tos Nijenhuis testimony, a great castle in the south of Germany, where there were different bishops from that part of the country. There was also Pope John Paul II, the Polish Pope. Also Menahem Schnerson and my doctor. They all raped me. They raped me in a group and then they put jokes on me. They liked to see me struggle. Another time, they took me to Saudi Arabia. There were more children. Also Schnerson was there, Cardinal Alfring, and doctor was there. I was naked. There were 3 men. Schnerson was in the middle. On both sides, there was Cardinal Alfring and Dr. Riddick. I had to fall down, and Schnerson went behind me. Then he turned me on the ground and raped me. After Saudi Arabia, I was raped until I was 12 years old, and after it stopped. Igor Mikhailovich, this age appears in a great many witness testimonies. The fact that they were abused, raped and tortured for up to 12 years, and the witnesses themselves actually do not understand why it is precisely this age. What is this all about?
The second search is precisely the period when a person is determined whom to serve. This was noted in many religions, especially in the ancient ones. Before the second search, a person is kind of in a choice. After the second search, the person has to decide whom to serve, God or Satan. After his determination, he already belongs to someone, and there is no sense in mocking him like that. They won't get the power they got before.
The testimony of the Dutch therapist Tos Nijenhuis. During the flight, a terrible thing happened there. Children were thrown off the plane. They took pleasure from the fact that children were screaming in horror. As she said, this was typical of Alfring. To confirm that this is not fiction, but real facts, I will quote from a press release of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. According to the words of a former employee of the Catholic Cathedral in Vancouver, they abduct Aboriginal children, take them to private yachts, abuse them, kill them, and get rid of their bodies, throwing them in the ocean outside the Canadian 12-mile limit of territorial waters. Representatives of Catholic clergy, businessmen, judges, military, and politicians involved in the Ninth Circle Satanic Child Sacrifice cult participate in this. An interview with Deborah, a 15-year-old girl who witnessed a bloody sacrifice ritual. There was a table and candles around it. There were people there, the ones who raped me. Can you tell me how did it happen? They cut a child. They cut off the foot and forced her to die. And at the same time, they were raping her. That is, he raped the child while others were watching. From the testimonies of witnesses, who in childhood were used in hunting as live targets and trophies. They and other children were raped and some of them were killed. The penises of the murdered boys were cut off and displayed like hunting trophies on the walls in one of the palaces in Holland. Tos Nijenhuis says that next to the castle where the members of the order gathered, there was a forest where they hunted children for fun. It was dark, around 9 o'clock in the evening. The children were naked and it was cold. They put something like shackles on their feet so that children couldn't move quickly. It was hunt with the hounds. They themselves were on horses. Dutch Prince Bernard and Cardinal Alfring were there. They released the hounds to hunt us. But you know, we couldn't run because our legs were chained. They were laughing and joking, while the kids were crying and screaming. Children were killed. Then they did with the children the same as with the hunted animals, hares and birds. They ate them. Or they gave children to the dogs to be eaten. I had to see it. After that, they took me hunting in England, Wales, and Scotland. Menahem Mendel Schnerson, Jewish chief rabbi, was in Scotland. From Fiona Barnett's testimony, an Australian citizen. On my 6th birthday, I was taken to the forest near Kayama. I was injected with a drug. When I woke, it was dark and I was lying naked, face up, spread eagle on a picnic table with my hands and legs tied. Perpetrators took turns sneaking up on me. A large group of people arrived in trucks. They carried rifles and a pack of starving Doberman dogs. For some children, they painted backs. For others, they painted chests and then let us go. Shots were fired and children began dropping all around me. With all hope lost of my saving the other children, I took off and ran for my life. Fiona Barnett also mentioned 2 former Prime Ministers of Australia, the Head of Parliament and the Commissioner of State Police, as the participants in the crimes of the cult of Ninth Circle Satanic Child Sacrifice, as well as Anthony David Kidman, the father of Nicole Kidman. He was a clinical psychologist, biochemist and university lecturer. There are a number of testimonies of adults who have witnessed similar atrocities of the representatives of the highest global elite, who are part of the secret order of the Ninth Circle of Satan. I will probably give one of such examples. A woman who was a witness said, "In 2004, I was an involuntary witness to a torture, rape, and murder sessions of drugged children performed for a group of high-ranked people of the Netherlands," stated a woman. "I was taken to a hunting party in Belgium close to Brussels, where I saw 2 boys and a girl aged 14 to 16 hunted and killed by global elites. The human hunting party was heavily guarded by the Netherlands Royal Guards. King Albert of Belgium was present." From the testimony of former Dutch banker Ronald Bernard, who was found dead in Florida after an interview in which he acted as a denouncer of occult practices and child sacrifices among the banking elite. That's what he says. And then you can say religion is a fairy tale, God doesn't exist, none of that is real. Well, for these people, it is truth and reality, and they served something immaterial, which they called Lucifer. When a person grows up to a certain status, he is invited to accept certain rules of the game. At the beginning, Ronald thought that all this was just a performance, but then, at some point, he was invited to take part in the sacrifices abroad. It went beyond all reason. The children. Were you offered to do this? Yes, and I couldn't do that. And from that moment on, I got worse and worse. I was warned when I got involved in this. If you can't put your conscience in the proverbial freezer on minus 100 degrees, then don't get involved in this. Then I laughed at it, but it wasn't a joke. That's what Svali, American woman from San Diego, says in her interview. My whole family, from the very origin, and my spouse are members of the Illuminati group. The Illuminati are Luciferians. Their roots go back to the ancient mystery religions of Babylon, Egypt, and Celtic Druidism. Many groups at the local level worship ancient deities, such as El, Baal, and others. When I was 12, my parents took me to initiation ceremony to the Vatican. Underneath the Vatican, there is a large room. It has 13 catacombs chambers leading into it. As you go down these steps into the room, you can see that it's circular. There was a large table in the center of the room. It was on the top of this huge golden pentagram. A little boy was placed in the center of the table and drugged. I think he was drugged because he was very quiet. He didn't move or say anything. Then they continued to do a child sacrifice. The man was in scarlet, he was speaking in Latin, and basically he was saying, please, accept the sacrifice on this day. And then he said, this sacrifice will seal the ceremony. And then he did it. And afterwards, we were told, slowly and precisely, may the same to you or worse occur should you ever break this oath. I've gone through some ceremonies in my life in the Illuminati. You do go through them. But I have to say that in my experience, this was the worst. Just because I can't explain the amount of darkness in that room. It was just pure evil. A similar story was told by several more people who had been in the organization since birth and belonged to very rich families. The document called The Magisterial Privilege became the property of the International Tribunal as evidence. According to this document of December the 25th, 1967, each new pope was obliged to participate in 9-circle satanic ritual sacrifice of newborn children, including drinking their blood. From the speech of the chief prosecutor, the plan was born of a twisted notion to derive spiritual power from the lifeblood of the innocent, thereby ensuring political stability of the papacy in Rome. These acts are not only genocidal but systemic and institutionalized. Since at least 1773, they appear to have been performed by Roman Catholic Church, Jesuits, and every pope. Cases do not reach the courts. Statements from witnesses are not accepted. If accepted, then rejected for lack of evidence. Actually, this issue is not widely raised or covered in the media. Independent international human rights defenders and witnesses themselves say the following: those who have to investigate the crimes are either themselves representatives of the Ninth Circle or their proteges. If the elite really wanted to get rid of all this, they would have done it a long time ago. However, we see that nothing is changing because the elite and support all this. It is their profit and business. Just as in the case of alcohol,